YouTube, Dawson Ryder here. Welcome to my review for the Power Rangers Dino Fury Season 1 finale. Now, we still do have the Christmas episode left to cover, which I'll cover tomorrow, but this is, for all intents and purposes, the regular season finale for the main story. And we pick up right where we left off, where Void Knight has made off with Dr. Akana's equipment because he's going to use it to try to revive his wife by connecting to the morphing grid, and the Rangers are trying to figure out what to do and why he wants it. And they come up with this plan because they realize that Void Knight is missing a piece, and they decide to use Ollie's mom as bait to sort of trap them into getting the piece so that they can, create a trap for him. And Ollie's really against it because he doesn't want to risk his mom's life, and he's really upset at Zato. But then he ultimately agrees to it because Zato says, it's her decision if we ask her for help. They ask her for help, and there's like a funny moment because, Ollie's been disguising his voice sometimes. It was really funny because I think it was yesterday's episode where he spoke and he said something and I forgot that he was disguising his voice and it sounded like that, no way, but I forgot he did that, but he didn't disguise it as much in this episode. But it was funny, he's like, I'm sure your handsome and smart son would say this, and she's like, yeah, that is how Ollie would describe himself. I'm like, yep, it's really hard for him, isn't it? Not being a douche. But that was pretty funny, and they use her as bait, and they're like, okay, talk on the phone and pretend you're talking about the flux capacitor or whatever it is. And she's like being really obvious about it, and the Rangers are watching her, and the villains do end up kidnapping her. And it's really kind of funny just because of how she's doing like this acting phone call, and then when the villains attack her, she's like, oh no, please don't. Like, it's just really funny, obvious bad acting. But Void Knight gets it, and then he just leaves her to the other villains, and then Slither and Mucus take off with her, and Ollie's pissed because he's like, I told you this was a bad idea. We totally risked her life. But Zato's like, don't worry, I'm going to save her. And he uses the Cosmic Key to do the Cosmic Formation for the T-Rex Champion Zord, and he uses it to portal out and save her and find her. Meanwhile, Void Knight starts an attack that the Rangers fight, and the Rangers wind up getting stuck in those sleep cuffs from that previous episode with the Reaper monster. And they also bring back Boom Tower a third time, and he gets destroyed a third time. And Ollie is the only one that manages to escape. And Zato winds up in this little pocket green dimension thing with the Megazord where he defeats the Reaper monster. So the Reaper monster is done exploded, which I was surprised by just because I assumed they might use him to bring back Wreckmate next season, because Wreckmate was only used as a one-off, and he was kind of a primary villain in Ryusoldier, so I expected them to take advantage of that footage. Not that I'm against them taking what Sentai did and throwing it away, because that's my favorite thing to do. But I did like Wreckmate. I mean, I guess, I don't know, I saw Wreckmate for one episode, I don't know, but he was one of my more favorite Ryusoldier villains, because he was one of the only ones I could take seriously, so I'm surprised by that. There could be a way that they could just rebuild Wreckmate 2.0, or something, but I was surprised by that because I assumed that they might use him next season to resurrect Wreckmate. But for now, it seems like the Reaper monster or the Necromancer monster or whatever is done exploded. And Zato saves Ollie's mom, and then you have Slither and Mucus just floating there, and he's like, we need help! And he's like, I can see that. And he just turns around. Loved that moment. I was really hoping that they would be gone for good. I didn't think they would be, and they are in the Christmas special, in case you're wondering. They leave it up in the air. I'll talk about that more in the Christmas special, but I'm not a fan of their characters, probably because I wasn't a fan of the Ryusoldier characters, but I was hoping that would be it for them, but it makes sense that they're not, again, because of footage. But he saves the mom, he brings her back, and Ollie's watching Void Knight use this machine, and he's like hooking all the Rangers up to it at Dino Henge to use the energy, and he's brought Mrs. Freeze there. And then Zato shows up and the mom shows up, and Zato tries to distract them, but he gets kidnapped as well. And then Ollie and his mom are trying to figure out a plan, and she's like, well, I'll distract them. And he's like, we saw how well that worked out the first time. And it was another beat of like, it's my choice to risk my life. And she winds up distracting Void Knight by using the dagger that Zato dropped and flinging it at the machine, and allows Ollie to destroy the Dino statues, because that's Ollie's plan, is if you destroy the statues, you cut off the connection to the grid, which will stop him from doing whatever he's trying to do. But then unfortunately after they do that, they all demorph because their connection to the grid is now lost. And then that's when Ollie's mom discovers who he is, and we get a really cool civilian fight after that between Void Knight and the Rangers because they don't have their powers. However, I'm a little bit confused as to how they're still able to use their weapons, and like I think Ion has his Morpher, because don't those come from the Ranger powers? I feel like, I'll have to go back and look, but I think like when we saw footage of the Rafcon Knights, they were just using regular swords. So I never thought that the Dino swords were from the Rafcon Knights. I thought they were from the Ranger powers. So it was weird to me that they were able to use those swords, and especially Ion's Morpher, if they're not connected to the grid. It's nitpicky, but it bothered me a little bit. But it was still cool to see a civilian fight, and that's my favorite type of civilian fight, is when the Rangers have no choice but to use their civilian powers, as it comes off more heroic than, hey, let's needlessly risk our lives in this battle by not morphing. Like, why don't you just morph? So I liked that, and I did find it interesting how Amelia was the one fighting Void Knight most of the time, because, the theory about him being her dad, that was pretty interesting to me, that he was the one fighting her. They wind up defeating him and destroying the machine. Izzy, angrily takes down the machine. He's like, "You hope you never get to save your sick wife." I don't think they saw that there was a lady in there, which is surprising, because I feel like somebody would have had to have seen it, and I'm surprised nobody even questioned what he was trying to do. I know this is the finale. I'm hoping that they discuss it next season. Because it's just weird to me that they've never thought about, well, what's he trying to do? But I guess nobody saw her, to be fair. But I was almost against Izzy at that moment, because regardless, I'm like, Vizzy. Void Knight's Vizzy is the Void Knight Izzy shipping name. Love triangle with him and Fern. Anyway, what was I saying? Oh, yeah. Because Void Knight's trying to save this lady, and Izzy just, so aggressively took down the machine trying to save this lady, and I almost disliked her in that moment for how aggressive she was about it. But it blows up the machine, and it seems to blow up Void Knight, but we know it doesn't. And it sinks into the ground, which would make you think Void Knight would be in their base and their base would be destroyed. But somehow at the end of the episode, you see that the case is back at the Area 62 and Void Knight's cracked helmet is there, because we know he'll be back next season. So I don't know how they got back there, and I don't know how the base isn't destroyed, because in the Christmas episode, the base is fine. But then after that, they're like, well, I guess we're disconnected from the grid. And then the Green Morphin Master shows up, and she says, your fight is not over yet, or your mission isn't over yet. And she repairs the statues and their connection to the grid, and they morph, and they're like, Power Rangers forever, or whatever, once a Ranger, because they say once a Ravcon Knight, always Ravcon Knight earlier, once a Ranger. It's a reference! Anyway, so it was a good ending. Part of me wishes that they would have left them disconnected for the grid, for the cliffhanger, and just had them be like, even though we don't have our powers, even though we're not Power Rangers, we still have power! Power of air! Be determined to still carry out their mission even without powers, and then maybe have, an episode next season before they get restored, just because I thought that would have been something cool to play with. But it still creates a lot of mystery with the Green Morphin Master showing up of why are the Morphin Masters getting themselves so involved? Why is it always the Green Morphin Master? Does she just always draw the short end of the stick? So I did like that, and I liked that it kind of tied back to the beginning of the show with the Morphin Masters in it, and even had Zato asking questions like, what happened to Ravcon? I have so many questions. So even though I think that would have been a beat worth exploring of them not having their powers, it was still a nice ending. And I thought it was overall a really good finale. It felt really high stakes, but yet it felt more like a season finale. It is, but you know what I mean? It's been interesting watching the last 10 years with the 2 seasons, is sometimes they try to make it feel like a finale where everything's really wrapped up, and then you have to figure out a way to restart everything at season 2, but this definitely felt more like a season finale, where we were clearly still keeping things up. Even Void Knight wasn't as clearly defeated as some people thought he might be. We know he'll be back next season, but it was an interesting cliffhanger for that. And I just liked the way the whole thing unfolded. I liked Zato going into the dimension to save Ollie's mom. I loved the final fight with Void Knight, where it was a civilian fight, and again, very interesting that Amelia was the one fighting Void Knight. And the score was on point in this episode. I've always enjoyed the Dino Fury score since the beginning. It's not only just a great score, but it's great that it's not an MMPR redux. But there's been a couple episodes where it was just extra. I think the one with Ion and Zato's flashback episode with the Raptors was really good, but this one too, there was some really good tracks that I hadn't heard before, and it just made it feel even more epic, which was great. So I thought it was a really good finale. I would give it a 4 out of 5. Very solid end to a solid season. I thought it headed us off. It closed things off nicely for the season, but also still leaves a lot for us to wonder about and speculate about and theorize about for season 2. So like I said, I will be covering the Christmas special tomorrow, and then the Netflix episodes all drop on October 15th for the US, so this probably won't matter to people that aren't watching these anyway, but I'm going to do a review of the whole second half of the season for those that are waiting for those episodes to drop, and then not long after that I'll do my full season review. But what did you guys think of this last episode and the season as a whole? Let me know in the comments as always. Until next time, like, comment, subscribe, and climb the steps and ring that bell so you get notifications for my videos. Dawson Ryder, signing out.